In today's podcast of Data for All, data in music. Welcome to the Data for All podcast. I'm Charlie Yielding.
And I'm Charlie Apigian, where we want to empower you to think different with data.
And welcome to our second episode where we dive into an industry and data. An industry and data?
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. So here, we can definitely do that. Where we dive into, is it better to say data in an industry?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would do the and.
Okay. You mean from the start?
Oh, just right there. I think that and part there is good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And welcome to our second episode where we'll dive into data in an industry. Hang on, I'm getting tongue twisted there.
Where we dive into data in an industry.
And welcome to our second episode where we dive into data in an industry. Our first episode was with...
Oh, remember, that is now a banned episode.
Oh, yeah, we can't talk about that.
Yeah, we can't talk about that first one. Yes, folks, we have a banned episode. Isn't that kind of interesting? And if you keep listening, maybe we'll have little nuggets come out. But at this point, Charlie, we're in negotiations with lawyers and things like that, right? No, of course.
It's our first bit of podcast drama for sure.
Absolutely. But what we have today is we will be looking at data in music.
And to help us with that hang on. This is literally the worst part. Like the second we get out of this, it's all good.
You know what? We're keeping that part in.
You
Forget it.
Yeah,
we're rolling. There we go. We got Trevor already on here. There we go. Oh, we're keeping it.
Okay. So do I even need to redo it then?
Oh, well, yes, because we need our audience to be a glimpse into the Charlie versus Charlie battles at the beginning of these episodes.
Fine. And to help us take that deep dive, Charlie, we have a guest that gets to do this for a living.
Yes, joining us today is Trevor Hinesley, founder and CTO of Soundstripe, which provides royalty-free music for videos and other content. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
So what is royalty-free music?
That is a great question because the term is sort of a misnomer, but it's what everyone knows it as. So you'll see it on every kind of every business that's like ours. You'll see that term everywhere because that's what people look for. But ultimately, royalty-free music is music where there's no royalties up front. So the customer doesn't have to deal with royalties. That gets a little more complex on the backside where you may have content going to broadcast where there's federally regulated back-end royalties, but the customer doesn't have to deal with that. So that's why it's called royalty-free music.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But we got before we go.
Yeah.
We got to let Trevor at least find out who he is, and we can go from there. So Trevor and I have known each other for a while now, ever since I started at Belmont, because we have a little bit of connection now that we're Belmont folks. And I was so intrigued when I first met you that we've had these amazing conversations about data and music, and I love your story. So I think it sets us up perfectly if we were to hear kind of his journey as we go through that. And Trevor, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit of who you are and how you got to be the really fancy CTO of Soundstripe.
Really fancy is one way to put it. Yeah. No, first I just want to say thanks for having me on here.
Oh, well,
I'm excited
thank you.
to chat about
I appreciate
this.
it.
Yes. So my name's Trevor Hinesley. I'm originally from Alabama, a little area called Dothan, which is in the southeast of Alabama. And I moved to Nashville in 2008 to go to college at Belmont. I've been playing music since I was 11 or 12 when I picked up a bass guitar. My uncle was a bassist, so I decided to try my hand at bass. Played for a couple years and then moved to guitar when I was 14 and never looked back. Loved it. So all I wanted to do my entire life was tour and play music. And, my parents definitely instilled in me a desire, but also they strongly encouraged me to get a degree. So I was like, all right, well, I heard about Belmont through a friend who his sister was a songwriting major, I believe. And he said they had a great audio engineering program. And so all I thought about was, wow, well, okay, if I can't tour or play music, maybe I can produce records, you know? Read about Belmont, loved it, fell in love, eventually came here for college, and I double majored in audio engineering, and then eventually got into computer science. I was kind of encouraged to do that through my roommate, fell in love with that, and it became a second passion of mine, really. So fast forward to graduation, I was a 4.5 year, so I got out at the end of 2012. And a band I was in was signing a record deal, so with a label that was based out of Nashville. And due to a series of circumstances, there were some things that we would probably have about a year of development before we really got on the road and started doing things heavily. So, during that time, I wanted to still pursue my other dream, which was software. And I wanted to be ethical about my job search and be transparent. Because again, this was, after I graduated, this was early 2013 when remote work was not the norm. So I knew that once we started touring, that was the only way I was going to be able to keep up a career, was to work.
So you were
remote.
looking to tour and have a side gig in computer science.
Yes, because it is very difficult to make a living in music. And and that's one piece of it. But the other two is I know how fast technology moves, and I didn't want to have a multi-year gap and then have to relearn everything.
That's very fair.
And so I interviewed at multiple places, got really close to the offer stage, and I was transparent throughout that I was in a band and we were signing a deal and all this stuff. And so there were questions about it, but I was clear that, within a year or so, I probably will need to work remote. And I just, I was like, I just need someone to give me a chance. I'll prove my work ethic, all of that. Having been on both sides now, on the business side, I completely understand the hesitancy from the other side, especially back then.
Yeah.
But every time I'd get close to offer stage, it fell apart. So I had like 3 jobs that I really thought were going to be offers, and all of them basically, kind of cut the conversations off towards the end due to the potential for tour in the future. So I was without a job. I started applying to be a waiter. I was like, okay, well, I just need to make money until we go on the road, I guess. But I wasn't giving up on that. So a friend of mine who I had worked under at an internship in college introduced me to a guy named Rob Humphreys, who's still in Nashville. Love him. I still get dinner with his family every now and then. He was the CEO of a new startup in town, and he did a guy that I had worked under at an internship, did an email intro with him. So we went and got coffee. I explained my scenario, and he said, look, I want to help you pursue both dreams. So he got a good deal, to be fair, on my salary,
That's a fair trade.
It was a great trade. I was like, are you kidding? This is great. I'll totally, it was perfect. Honestly, and he wound up being just an incredible person. So worked under him for a while. He eventually left that business, and I moved to more of freelancing for it. So I'm still working for them, but doing other stuff. Eventually I started working for an app agency, and the majority of my touring career was centered around freelance work, that app agency, and building what is now Soundstripe. So towards the end of my touring career, I had a friend of mine that I had done some web work for introduced me to 2 guys who, quote unquote, had an app idea. And when you build software, everyone has an app idea. So at first I was a little hesitant. I was actually working on a side business already with a good friend of mine that friend actually is the one that stoked my entrepreneurial spirit. I never really thought of being an entrepreneur, which is funny because that's what building a band is. And that's what, freelancing is. But, anyway, he sent me a podcast, and it was a business podcast. I fell in love with it. So we were working on a business on the side. I was overcommitted because I was doing 30 hours a week for an app agency and touring full time, my own freelance work, and trying to build that business.
Wow.
And I got introduced to these 2 guys named Micah and Travis. long story short, I fell in love with them. Loved, they were still kind of working out what the idea would be, but I knew if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be them, and I wanted to be a part of it. So we did start building it, and 4 or 5 months later, we launched. This is beginning of 2016. We launched the first version of Soundstripe.com, and I toured for another 10 months, and it finally got to a cliff where I decided that there was no chance that I could keep going with that while touring. So made a really hard decision, pretty much like the band had really hit its stride and was doing great things, but I sat on it for a few months and came to the decision that I had to get comfortable with, if this band gets on, Jimmy Kimmel tomorrow, I'll be able to stomach it if I leave today. Right.
That's hard.
That's
really
it
hard.
was very hard. But I got there as comfortable as I could get with it. I left the band on great terms with them, still close friends. And have been pursuing Soundstripe full time ever since. Now we have around 60 full-time employees across over a dozen states, and are trying to change what it looks like to use music and content. So.
Yeah, and before we get into that, Charlie, can I ask questions about touring? Because I have no musical ability, but if you could hire somebody with no musical ability to go on tour, that would have been me at the age of 22.
That's awesome.
And so I think it is fascinating, because I know we've had these conversations before of kind of what it was like. But so how long did you tour with that band?
Yeah, so after like the year of development or so that we did, I think it was probably 3.5 years of full-time-ish touring. So
for 3.5 years, how much of that was on tour? Like 60% of your time, 100% of the time?
It's tough. The way I think about it is how many shows we did in a year. Because a lot of times there's travel days between and before and after and stuff. And then other times it may be you do 2 shows, 2 days back to back. So, but we would do anywhere from, like, depending on the year, one year we may be working on a record more, or just have more festival dates that are one-offs or whatever. But we would do anywhere, I think, from like 80 to 125 shows a year or something like that.
Okay.
And that's a good bit, right?
Yeah, it's a decent bit. Now, I mean, I have some friends that are true road dogs that do like 250 shows a year. And that's where you're home for a month a year, maybe, and that, to be fair, like, I don't think, I can't speak for them, but I don't think any of us wanted that.
Yeah.
What was really cool is the rest of the band was very entrepreneurial too. The other guitar player owns a marketing agency with about 25 employees. The drummer owns a custom woodworking business where he does like really high-end furniture. The vocalist is just a really celebrated hair and makeup artist for different artists and things, and also did like custom clothing. She made all of our stage outfits and stuff.
That's cool.
So there was a lot of that spirit, and what was kind of unique about it is there was a lot of understanding there, because as soon as we'd play the show or sign autographs or whatever it was, I was always back on a computer, and that wouldn't have gone over with some bands, because they want you to be in the rock star lifestyle. You're out all night or you're whatever. And there was so much understanding in our band. It was
that's
really
cool.
Yeah.
And what was the band name again?
Veridia, Veridia. Yep.
Yeah. And so were you in bands when you were at Belmont?
Yes. At one point, I was actually playing between like 6 or 7 different bands. So I was doing, while I was there, I was in, I filled in for a couple pop punk bands. I had sort of like a pop punk type band with some friends. I was in the first signed act I ever played with. I was a fill in for a couple shows that was death metal, and then went from that to basically a boy band. So we were like pastel colors and bow ties on stage.
Sweet.
I mean, full on.
I want that picture.
They're out there. Very like Jonas Brothers style, because we all played instruments, so it wasn't full on, NSYNC dancing and stuff. I mean, I wish I was talented enough to do something like NSYNC, but we did. It was a lot of fun, honestly. It was a ton of fun, but it was very like teeny bopper music, And I went from that to the rock band that I toured with for a long time, which was kind of between the death metal and boy band,
Wow.
Yeah.
So what would what would a gig be? What would I mean? Are you in a bar? Are you big arenas? All of that kind of stuff.
All of the above.
Really awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean we had I have played everything from shows with 0 people, literally. Even in the band that I toured with full time, like we had shows. Because it is surprising how much of that is dependent on promotion and stuff, right? So like you could have a ton of fans in an area, but if they don't know you're coming, like until a couple days before, or they don't know at all, that's a problem. So we ran into that a couple times. But yeah, we played everything from that, which is no one being there, all the way to we played the Georgia Dome. There was 38,000 people. So ran the gamut. And actually recently, about 2 months ago, I guess. Anyway, in November, they called and asked me to fill in, and it just happened to work with my work schedule. So I went for about 2.5 weeks. We did a European arena tour with Evanescence and a band called Within Temptation. That was
wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. When I hear bands I actually know, it's like, what? That is really cool. What was your favorite place you played?
Oh, favorite place we went to actually was probably Zurich, Switzerland. That was really cool. But my favorite show was London. So it was at the O2 Arena, and it was sold out, and that was like a bucket list show for all of us, because the O2 is just like a legendary venue there. So that was really cool. And the other bands were like absolutely amazing, just incredible people, very accommodating. We never felt like the new kids on the block. They were awesome. So it was a really cool experience.
So you said you didn't make much money. I think what people don't, they think while you're doing these sellout shows, all this other stuff, you must be just raking in the money. How much you get a day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, at one point, we'll take that Georgia Dome show, for example. And as a clarifying point, this has absolutely nothing to do with like anyone in the band or the financial state of the band. It's just
a normal start. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, a band like that is a startup, like I mentioned, right? So you've got expenses, you've got like that big tour. We did the Georgia Dome tour was a traveling arena tour, and it lasted for about 3 months. But those kind of tours, your label is typically doing some sort of, when you're that young of a band, you're either getting bought onto it and your label's covering it and you have to recoup it, or you're doing some kind of trade with the other labels that are sponsoring the tour, for like marketing dollars or whatever. There's like all sorts of logistics that go into that. And typically those become recoupables when you're an early enough band, at least. So anyway, when we were on that big tour, I mean, there at one point, I think we like the Georgia Dome show, for instance. One way to think about it is that we played to 38,000 people, and my paycheck that day was $50, and I had a $20 per diem, I think.
Sweet.
So, and again, we were all trying to make the dream work. None of us were making money. But and it wasn't, to be fair too, there was no Big Bad Wolf label in my eyes. Like we knew what we were getting into with all these things. You're taking risks up front for payoff later. That's how it works, right? But that is the reality of the music business, is that model is really tough and in many ways is broken. So, meanwhile, software pays more than that an hour when I was freelancing. So I was like, where is the dichotomy here? Very strange.
That's actually what I want to know. It's like, where is the dichotomy between the old and the new?
It's a great question. Well, old and new, just in the music business in general? Or?
Well, yeah, because it, like, from an outsider perspective, because like I was in the band in high school and whatnot, but I love listening to music, and I love all kinds of music, and I like knowing that the music that I listen to, the folks get paid,
right?
And so just a little bit of YouTube, and you see like how a lot of people get shorted, like they spend a lot of money before the record's even made, and then all the proceeds go to the label or to the to the stable owner, whatever you call 50 Cent in this case. So the music used to be, you printed it on a physical piece of material and they sent it out, whether it be records, 8 tracks, tapes, CDs, whatever.
Sure.
When that transitioned, in the early aughts, because of, Napster, Kazaa, all that kind of stuff like that, it really changed the model into something that is like, it's infinitely scalable.
Right.
You create one product, and then that product is like multiplied for free.
Right.
There's no production and stuff like that. It's from the physical aspect of
Yeah,
it. But then
100%.
there's the realm you play in was like, well, used to be if you played a song on a radio, and I think it still works like this, then you get a royalty that builds
Sure.
up over time. But how does that work? And earlier you mentioned that sometimes you don't pay up front for it, and it's only in the back end, and that's confusing. But then you've got subscription services like Spotify
Sure.
or YouTube Music or whatever. And like I know when I listen to something there that they get a fraction of like the cost or whatever
Yeah.
it is, and then it's and that's distributed in a way that is standardized or is not standardized, or like it's very confusing to me because I don't know what the best way to consume music is, but I really like the streaming stuff.
Sure.
Because it gives me access to basically everything.
100%. So, just riffing off of that, I mean, the history of it is that when Napster took it from one extreme to the other, right?
Yeah.
There was a whole situation of gatekeepers because you also had, if you think about it like the book publishing industry and what Amazon did for that, frankly, Napster did the same thing. They just did it with a free model instead of a online marketplace. So what happened is you went from, oh, I can only get the music one that I know about, right? Because that's the book model I was referring to is publishers bought books that would sell on shelves,
Sure.
right? So what got bought determined what was made.
Yeah.
Like Seth Godin has his podcast, I think it's called Akimbo. He has an episode where he talks about distribution determining what's made, and it's so true. And the book example is that they would buy books that they knew were going to sell on shelves, but that perpetuates because then people can only buy what they have access to, right? So they're going to buy the best of that. So that may only be the one or two or three genres, and it could take a long time for trends to change due to that, right?
So that is actually one of my favorite aspects of the entire change is that I get access.
And that's a really cool part of it. And again, Napster was one way, because I remember back then, like everyone, if you're listening, NSA or whoever would get me for this, when I was pirating music as a kid, I would
Same.
like you'd see all these like you'd try to like download a song and the file name would be like it was hard to read. It was like a bunch of capital letters, and then it would have stuff about like where it was ripped at, like how they got it off CD, and you'd try to find the best quality version and like. But through that, sometimes I'd get a song. And then I'd be like, I don't think this was even what I was looking for. And I would like look at the metadata through like Winamp or whatever media player I was using, and it'd be a different song. And I was like, this is sweet. I've never heard of it. And, or even as I'm searching through stuff, I'd find things that because maybe like the person who uploaded it had a bunch of other stuff in their cat. I mean, there was so many ways where that actually kind of started that discovery phase that was not possible as much as it could have been with record stores and stuff, because they were the same way as bookstores, like I was referring to. So that's the start of all that. And then when you had the subscription services, that was Daniel Ek's whole thing, is that if you can win on user experience, people will pay for music again, right? And I'm not even like I wouldn't make any arguments. I don't know Daniel Ek.
Who is that?
Yeah, he's the CEO of Spotify.
Okay, thank you.
So, but he's a very like controversial figure in this because he's the one that, is now artists are getting paid a fraction of a cent because him, et cetera. But at the same time, if you look at the trends, I mean, streaming surpassed physical sales for the first time a couple years ago. And if it keeps going like it has been, it will be a bigger business than physical distribution ever was. And so now the argument then becomes, well, Spotify's royalty is so low, et cetera. And I don't even want to argue that piece one way or the other, other than to say what I will say is that it is fundamentally different to look at buying a CD for $10 that you could then listen to thousands of times over your life.
And I can give it to somebody else.
And you could give to someone else, and no one, and it goes through used stores and, secondhand market and all this stuff, and no one makes any money from that. It is so different to try to compare that to a per stream monetization model, because you are basically, a stream is not worth the cost of a song. You are listening to it once. It's not the same as buying it and getting perpetual listening. Right. That's all I will like that's my soapbox, is that the argument there is you have to look at that holistically if the argument's going to be made. And the other thing is, if one side will suffer, right? Because customers either have to pay more for that royalty rate to go up, or the artists have to make less.
Mhm.
Because the only thing that both now, it's Spotify's margins are already bad, is why I say that.
Mhm.
So like if we're just using them as the example, like would people pay $25 a month for Spotify? I don't know. And what happens if the number of subscribers gets cut in half? Then you're at the same pool that's being distributed and the
Mhm.
royalty rate's the same. So like it is a much harder problem than people give it credit for.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. But the opposite of that is, so you've got the free version that has ads. How
Yep.
much are those ads worth? And is the entry level low enough to be inclusive? And as opposed to, like, you can go up and that generates more revenue,
Sure.
but you can also go down and potentially generate more revenue too.
Yes. So you're talking about like opening up, do you mean just opening up a free offering?
Not well, I mean, there is a free offering,
Right.
but it's like, it's random. They take stuff away, and I'm
Sure.
down with that. Like, you can limit access if it's free.
Absolutely.
And then, make people deal with ads and whatnot. But I'm talking about like is there a space where there's an entry level, premium-ish version that's like, maybe it's the radio station that only plays
I got
the commercials every 30 minutes in
Right.
a row, and then you go back to music and stuff.
Right.
But maybe it was $2.
Sure.
Like, could you not generate more revenue potentially if the user base is larger?
Potentially, but then that's almost the Pandora model, right? Because it's very like, and there is value in that. But I think what we've learned, especially as things have changed hands, like Spotify is at a whole different level than Pandora ever was, even at its height,
That's true.
right? But that's not to say that wouldn't work. I think because of Spotify's audience, there may be opportunities there. But due to, and this is to your other point, due to the fact that, so there's two different sides of copyright. There is sound recording, and then there is composition. Sound recording is, one way to look at it is if I do a cover song, I own the sound recording because
Okay.
I made the sound.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yep.
You didn't write the lyrics.
Didn't
but-
write the song. Yeah.
Okay.
So then there's the composition side. And where this gets very complicated, particularly as it relates to my business, is there are there's a thing called a synchronization license.
Okay.
So and this affects podcasts as well. So if you're going to put copyrighted music into another medium, if you're going to sync it with another medium, so it could be I think podcasts technically, podcasts are sort of in this gray area because they're like, I mean, now there's video podcasts clearly, but it's also like, it's not necessarily, even with that, it's not really like a video, it's not a show like we would think of that laws around TV were made for.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not a syndicated show. Or
Exactly.
Like that.
So anyway, synchronization license is a license you have to get from the rights holders to pair their copyrighted material with some new work
Okay.
that you're trying to make. Where this gets very complicated is, take the cover song example. You don't just have to get, even though if you put a sound recording into your podcast, you have to get clearance from all sides. So you can't just go to the person that did the cover and get clearance. You've got to find the original songwriter that owns, or whoever now owns, the composition rights and get clearance on the publishing side too. That's what that is. Where this is even trickier is the master side, which is the sound recording. That's called a master recording. The sound recording side is free market negotiated.
What does that mean?
Like it's how the labels negotiated, which, like this was part of the big rhetoric around Spotify too, is the major labels negotiated higher per stream royalties than you would get as an artist going through a distributor or something.
That makes sense. So they're butting on the back end, trying to get as much as they can of the pot.
Yes, and they own equity in Spotify, so it's a double dip scenario. And like, I mean, on their end, that is good business, but it also, that's where the conversations around, is this a market dynamic we want to?
It's exclusionary though.
Yes.
It's not a level playing field.
Exactly. Except on the publishing side. So there is the mechanical royalty, which this is the one that that is when you are buying a CD. you are buying a mechanical purchase. So
Okay.
you're buying, essentially when you buy a CD, you're buying a mechanical license to listen to that in perpetuity.
And own it. And
Yeah,
all that.
yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
But you don't own, no, you actually don't own the music. So you own a license to listen
Oh
to
yeah,
that.
like I can't rip it and then give it to somebody else. But
Exactly,
I've got the physical
technically.
copy.
Yeah, and the Mechanical Licensing Collective is right here in Nashville.
Yes,
Good
it
old
is.
Chris Aaron,
Yes, it is.
Is one of the people. Actually, he is leading that charge, and that's a government entity, isn't it?
I believe so,
Or,
yeah.
or they're at least charged by the government to manage
To be a
all
mediator.
of that.
Yes. So that is, but Spotify negotiated royalties for the mechanical side. But then there is a whole performance royalties.
Wait. Hang on. Actually, so why did they do that? Because they're not included in this anymore.
So Spotify, well, the way it works is that even though, like with Spotify, you're not buying a CD, right? But it is the same mechanism as like an iTunes purchase, which was a mechanical purchase.
Really?
Yes, because you're doing it through a digital platform, right? But here's the difference with Spotify. There was two sides to this because Spotify also is beholden to a federally regulated, not free market regulated royalty on the, which is performance royalties.
Okay.
And those were made for, and I'll explain how Spotify is beholden to this in a minute, but those were made for, and people who are listening to this that are rights expert, there are probably details about this I'm getting wrong.
Oh, no, I'm
it's
still learning
very
some stuff.
complicated. Yeah.
Well, this is all about pointing people in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happened though, basically, is that when TV became a thing and you dealt with syndication and broadcast, the federally regulated side was like, even with radio stations, it became almost impossible to like regulate what was being played on radio and like how to deal with, we don't know how many people are listening, right? That kind of stuff. So the federal government put in a royalty structure in place to where radio stations could play it not knowing how many people were listening and just keep track of the music they were playing. And then they would negotiate. There was basically that was the federally regulated piece. They would pay out performance royalties to BMI, CSAC, and ASCAP, which are performing rights organizations that the government, similar to the mechanical side, has tasked with collecting these, right? I believe the government has tasked them with that, but I do know that there's only 3 in the US. Okay, that's the performing rights side. Spotify actually has to pay royalties on both sides because unlike iTunes, iTunes, you download it and you are playing it. In Spotify, you are streaming it from a separate server, which is a performance.
Okay.
So that's the other thing is that Spotify, they would negotiate with labels on the mechanical side and then have to pay a fee to songwriters, which are on the publishing side.
Yeah.
That is federally regulated. So labels could get a bigger piece of the pie on this side, but not on this side. Yeah. So it's very complicated.
No, but you just hit on something that clicked something for me from my side because I kind of had assumptions about like why things were the way they were, like why people got paid more and why they didn't. But it seems like maybe the record labels, maybe some other side party made Spotify pick up an entire industry, even the parts that it didn't need anymore.
That's
and so
interesting.
you've got to help them. It's like you can't. Yeah, you're going to stream this, because like I like Tool, and they were notoriously against getting on any kind of streaming platforms for a while. But they're finally on there, and I didn't know if anything changed. But hearing that they've got to pay the mechanical license, and you can, if I'm off on this, please let me know. But it seems like they were like, you can use the music, but you gotta bring this guy along, and it's going to cost more because of that.
Yeah. So there was, I think what I'm hearing you saying is that if the labels were going to party with them, basically, they wanted their whole catalog. Is that what you're saying?
They wanted to support their entire, even if it's an antiquated like piece of the industry, because I'm seeing this right now in my industry, they're trying to hobble along a lot of legacy systems. I'm sure you.
Well, they benefit from it. That's why. Yeah.
They totally do.
Yeah.
But they've got the ecosystem going, and so it's just like, even though we don't need these people anymore, we want to keep them around, and then you got to pay them too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think what an interesting thing streaming did too is it actually gave a new evergreen life to legacy content. So you had some of the stuff from 60s, 70s, 80s is making more money than modern music is on streaming. So you've got like people that are basically getting a second career out of it. You know?
Like the
All right,
the
I'm
thing
gonna
from
have to.
Stranger
I'm
Things.
gonna step in here because we are going down rabbit holes and haven't actually talked about what we're talking about today. So I'm gonna stop us here for a second. And I love your conversation, but we haven't talked about what is streaming. You got to remember, this is not our audience is going to be more of a layman in this area. And what I'd like to take it back to is thinking about where music was, where we would obviously buy things, and everything was either a record, then it became a cassette, then it became a CD, and now we're in the streaming game. And I like the way that you broke it out into songwriters and musicians. And when you look at the way the Mechanical Licensing Collective works, which is basically a huge catalog of all the music that's out there and all the rights to it. And then based on that, you divide up who gets paid.
Yep.
And so if you play a song, all of the different players should be in there. And it's interesting because if you do not go in the system and say it's you, so if it says John Smith was the person that wrote it back in 1960.
Yep.
If John Smith doesn't go in there and say, that's me, and this is my address, he doesn't get paid.
Really?
Yeah. And that's a huge thing. I know I've talked to the people over at the Mechanical Licensing Collective in the past, and that's their whole campaign is trying to get people to get into their system. So Trevor, if you don't go in there and get your rights, you don't get paid.
Right.
So then you've got the ASCAPs and the BMIs out there that they have to pay you. They're like required to, like if it's on a YouTube channel or any of those kind of things, they want to pay you. So this is all a data problem, right? No, they don't want to pay you. They are required to pay you.
Yeah.
So
but if you don't claim it,
that's
what I want to get to. It's really funny because what they do is they say, John Smith.
Yeah, right.
John Smith, where are you?
Yeah.
And if John Smith doesn't say, that's me, and it's like a 3 year.
3 year. Yeah.
3 year. In 3 years, they keep the money. So,
technically, yes, and
they keep it in a spot that's not John Smith's bank account.
Exactly. So it is basically a float that what happens after 3 years, because they can use it as a float until then, basically.
Yeah.
After 3 years, my understanding is that it goes into what is basically known as a black box because no one really knows, right, what is in there. But basically, this black box after 3 years is distributed pro rata, or not even pro rata, it's distributed equally, I believe, to everyone that is registered with those performing rights organizations.
Oh, that's good.
So you basically, what it winds up happening is you get everyone gets a couple pennies.
Yeah.
Because it's just, whereas it could have been thousands of dollars for this one person, or it could have been, but what happened is all of the accounting for that particular person's stuff couldn't be tied to them. So it went into this, and then that happens 10,000 times. And then you've, got 6, 7, 8 figures in there, but it's just split out among bajillion people and it's worth nothing.
So do you get royalty checks?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anybody that's been part of a recording has the right. What's interesting, we did a data hackathon on campus back November of 2021 with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So that's why I know a lot about the data is I've literally looked at the data. And there were students of ours that were working on it and they go, oh my gosh, that's me. They were in the system and they didn't know, because if you've recorded, if you are a songwriter, if you've done anything, you're one of those. So if there's 15 people on it, then it's 1/15 is yours.
Yeah.
Or however it gets divvied up. And so they, that day, signed themselves up in the Mechanical Licensing Collective to get their rights.
That's awesome.
And it was really cool. But you have to become a data person now to be a musician because of the complexity that you all we're talking about.
Yes. And actually what I was hoping, so you mentioned the old versus new, right? And so all of that to me was a preface to the fact that one major benefit of streaming now is the amount of data, because beforehand, all you had was sales data. Yeah. But now you have an immense amount of streaming data, favoriting, playlisting, adding people to playlists. I mean, there is so much meat there to unpack. And I think that's even the old business labels are using all that data to determine who the next hits are and stuff. Yeah. So it has totally evolved, and it became what used to be a very finger to the wind, like, oh, I think this will be the next big hit. And a lot of those were big hits, but how much of that was due to what we were talking about earlier, the gatekeeping?
Yeah.
It was the only thing you could listen to on the radio.
I've noticed the algorithms. So I use YouTube Music because I stay away from Spotify. But in YouTube Music over the past year, just the algorithm alone has gotten so much better. If I pick a song, because I like to explore now, I pick a song and then I just let that song play the playlist that's associated with it.
Right.
And I've come across so much good music over the past year
Have you?
that I wouldn't have heard otherwise.
Nice.
But it used to be trash.
Sure.
It used to be I click on the song and then
Yeah.
it jumps somewhere way over there
Yeah.
and plays something that was terrible.
Oh man, you know, and so and I've heard from a couple of producers here in town that everything's now based on the first 20 seconds of a song based on what they play on TikTok. And
right.
if it doesn't get a
yeah.
bunch of likes, it's not going to be played. So now data is in a predictive mode.
Yeah.
Where I mean, that's why there's not many songs that will. It's not the old Led Zeppelin days where a song would take 2 minutes
Sure.
to get to the actual meat of it. Right.
Yeah.
It is in the first 20 seconds. It's a hit because of the TikTok generation.
That is very interesting. And I was in a panel one time where someone brought this up. I was not familiar. And gosh, I cannot remember her name, unfortunately, but there's an artist on TikTok. And she is actually using data to create music in a way where she'll basically just like spit out like one line with like a melody, and depending on the reaction, she monitors all this, and depending on the reaction, she'll then add a chorus, a verse, a bridge, or whatever,
Wow.
builds her music out that way. And she's had some like hits pretty much from that.
Building music with data.
Yeah, and she does it. She iterates, right? And so that's a very data minded approach, because you're basically taking the same data I was just talking about, like interaction, behavior, that kind of stuff, and using that. Even to Seth Godin's point, you are using how music is distributed now, which is TikTok and how that platform works and stuff, to determine what is created. Even book writers are doing that. Like authors are literally, they'll do a chapter, read it on their book talk. That's what it's called. And depending on how well it does, they'll write the whole book or can it or put it in a short story or something.
Because a little bit can allow you to predict success better than just guessing. I mean, so why not give it a try? I mean, you know, you as a musician probably have a good ear for, you know, what you think people will like, but isn't it better to actually ask the people with little samples? And of course, then it's great marketing for the future. So let's get into a little bit of your actual business then. And so what is then royalty-free music? I know we explained a little bit in the beginning, but now we've talked about how, how kind of Spotify works, but
Right.
you know, I can get a subscription to Soundstripe right now for $9.99 and I get the entire library. Is that what I get?
Yes. Yeah. For $9.99 you do. Yes. And
Okay.
it's that plan is for YouTubers basically. Yep.
Okay.
And
Or podcasters?
so the interesting thing about podcasters is
Oh,
that,
he goes back. He doesn't like us, I think.
No, I love podcasts. Matter of fact, my best friend, his whole business is built on his podcast. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for podcasting, actually. No, the YouTube plan is $9.99, but even our next step up, which is we call it our pro offering, it serves podcasts and everything. We were talking earlier about a synchronization license, right? Being able to pair content with something else. Notoriously difficult to get one of those because of all the rights holders involved with songs. Like you mentioned, you could have 15 on one, right? We wholly own our catalog all the way through. So we basically control all the rights there. And again, having been me and both my co-founders were musicians. So we did it in a way that's it would take much too long to explain. But it's a win-win-win for the artist, the customer, and the business. And really what it is we buy the music up front. And so they do get an upfront fee, but we also share those performance royalties. So if they get in a broadcast commercial or they get syndicated somehow, you get a check quarterly for that from the PROs, the performing rights organizations.
So if one of those was in a commercial on the Super Bowl,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
then they would get a lot more than they would if it was just us playing it.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I got you.
But for the same reasons that Spotify has to pay performing rights or performance royalties, so does YouTube. So what's interesting about all of this is that it is this is the royalty free term we were talking about. It's talking about the synchronization license. Because there were some sync licenses, as they're called, in the past where not only would you have to pay a fee, but they wanted a royalty. And that's where people used to get like nervous about like, oh, well, even if I do cut a sync license for this song in my video, I may have to pay the upfront of it if you're the video creator, even though the broadcast royalties paying
that
them
makes
back
sense.
in. Yeah.
So if I was to sample somebody's song and that was our intro, I would probably have to pay every time we had an episode.
If let's say you know,
this is not a Soundstripe one.
exactly.
This is
Let's say you
else.
license some, Bob Dylan track. We're able to do that somehow. If you did, it's very possible that someone like that would want, they may want a portion of your royalties, or a portion of your revenue.
Well, good. We can do that because we make nothing.
Well, so it's like
That kind of thing.
it gives them the ability to like set terms.
Sure.
Okay,
Because-
and that's a negative if you're trying to do business.
It can be for sure. And especially if you're dealing with like, you've got really what Soundstripe does is it sets creators up to where you can just focus on creating
Sure.
and not have to worry about all that. But ultimately, I get why it used to be like that, and it still is for like, top artists. But really it was so that, think about like your favorite movies and such, like take a John Williams track out of a movie. It is not the same movie.
Yeah,
Like it has just as much value as the visual content. So that's the idea, is that.
that makes sense. I was watching a thing about Snatch the movie lately.
Yeah.
Or recently.
Yeah.
And I just learned that they paid $61 million for a Madonna license.
Yeah.
Wowza.
Yeah.
do
And
it.
so that feels about the same
Yeah.
as far as like how they can attach to a project
Yeah.
and really kind of like
So
It depends on how bad they want it, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, they did. I think he was dating Madonna at the time.
Oh, well, that'll
he
help.
was.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
Guy
right.
Ritchie was.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little backdoor. Well, anyways.
Yeah. Right.
So let me ask you a question about Soundstripe then. So one of the things that's been happening in the streaming world lately is you can't play music anymore because they were coming in and they were copyright striking
Right.
your channel.
Yeah.
And that used to be a thing. It's just like I'm playing games and I'm listening to music and stuff.
Totally.
So
We have a solution for that.
that's what I was getting at. So do you really have the basically the answer to the streamer solution? So listen, if you want some background music, just play our stuff because it's all contained right here.
Yes. We even have
And we're not going to copyright strike you.
right. We have, we actually have an extension in Twitch. So in your account, they have like an extensions tab. You can
Yeah.
click it. There's a Soundstripe music one. And when you click it, it gives you a little window where we have a free Twitch plan. So you can use anything from our free, it's like a subset of our catalog, and they're put into these long form playlists. So some are made for retro gamers. Some playlists are for like people that do shooter games, like it's different stuff tailored for that, but you can just hit play and it'll loop. It's like hours of music.
So if they cut a VOD from their stream and then post that to YouTube, it extends in the same way, or do they have to pay extra fees, or like how does that work?
Depends on your plan. So if you are, let's say you're on the free Twitch plan, right? And you stream something and it becomes a VOD, and then you upload it to YouTube. All that happens is we will basically monetize your video on YouTube, right? But we don't take it down. There's no blocks on, like, we're not going to go block your stuff when it goes to YouTube. We're going to take the ad revenue. If you want your own ad revenue on YouTube, that's the YouTube plan.
Okay.
You just pay for that and you can monetize your channel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've got a free way to use it, but they're not going to make money. So if they're a small time creator or whatever, they can, they're not making money off of it anyways.
Right.
But then if you get into a bigger situation where, like you really want to monetize it, you can, because there's a fee that's, I assume, like reasonable
Right. Yes, it is.
for the circumstances and whatnot.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, royalty free means, so if I put a song from your catalog in a YouTube video and I pay for my subscription, again, there's the first one is $9.99, the Pro is $19.99
Yes.
right now, and that means I can play it. Do I have to have what if I stop paying for my subscription?
Okay, so the way it works is we issue, this was another thing, is sync licensing used to be notoriously periodic. So you would basically pay for a year to use it or whatever. That does not work with YouTube. You're not going to pull your video down in a year, right?
Yeah.
And that was our whole thing is if you make something while you are actively subscribed, you own the sync license to that in perpetuity. So yeah, so
that's such a win-win.
Yeah. Like you can, if you sign up and let's say you're working on a podcast season for 3 months and then your podcast goes dormant for the next 9 months, you are totally within your rights to cancel, and everything you've made up to that point is licensed forever. So.
And so that's in the contract that I signed with you to begin with, or that you or
yes, it's exactly. Now that doesn't, you can't keep using that same music for new projects, but
I gotcha.
The content you have already paired together and synced synchronization license is good to go.
That is a really good solution.
Yeah,
I like that.
Sounds like what you did is you thought about the user. You thought about the content creator as opposed to the record label.
Totally.
I feel that it's very important to point out that he probably has, you guys over at Soundstripe probably have a different perspective than the traditional stuff, because it feels like you never had any of that old stuff slammed into your work yet. So where do you... are we getting too far into it? Am I jumping to down the road?
I think
questions?
this is the heart of data is in a service like this, and how you have transformed music because of the ability to use data and technology.
Sure.
I mean, without that, you can't do something as unique as what you all are doing.
Right.
So I think this is a great use case for us explaining data in music. So no, I don't think we're going too far.
So I assume that using technology allows you, and as a C-level executive, you look down the road as far as you can.
For sure.
And so how do you deal, sorry, I'm trying to ask 3 questions at once, and so I've got to formulate it in my brain.
This happens to Charlie a lot.
It happens to me too. I totally get it.
Yeah. And that's why he's the other Charlie and I'm the
Charlie one.
Yeah. No, it's actually the other way around. Notice I'm really screwing with him now, because now he really doesn't know what this question
No,
is.
you actually talked enough to where I've got the question.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's our new secret sauce.
So do you plan for the traditional music industry to come to you, or are you going to go after it at some point, or are you going to leave them alone?
That is a great question. And what I'll say is that this is one of those things where, I think labels in general are more open to, like you've even seen, they're all cutting deals with TikTok and stuff so that their music can be used without issues and takedowns and stuff. Now, Twitch has notoriously been behind on that. But this is one of those things where, as platforms mature, labels, I think, and I'm talking about platforms because that is the new distribution mechanism that we're talking about, right? And it's also online platforms, streaming, podcasts, all these things are the things that don't work with the old model because copyright law is outdated. So it does not work for this stuff.
Yeah. And you're going cross media too.
Cross media. Yeah. Yeah. Like when you make something, it's not just for one. And that was the other issue that we were trying to solve is even if you went and negotiated a sync license, what happens when you did that in 2012 and then TikTok comes on the scene and you want to re-upload your video to that? You can't because you only negotiated it for the they're not going to give you a blanket license to use it anywhere. So you'd have to go renegotiate. Yeah. And ours are. So in any medium, it even says that in our terms, in any medium now or forthcoming, basically, you're good to go.
Gotcha. Yeah. And what you all do is a certain lane. There are companies that will probably go after more of the big music, like Pex. I think about, where Chris McMurtry, a good friend of ours, is over there. They're kind of getting in that, and they're the ones that are kind of the watchdogs, making sure that you do get paid.
Yeah.
And that's really,
it's important too.
Really important work is, if something is played on YouTube is probably not going to go and try to find you, Charlie, and say, here's the money that you are deserved. But Pex is doing that. And they're going to YouTube and saying, hey, that was just played. You got to pay it now.
Right.
If you're not monitoring it, then you've got to pay it. And so it's an interesting dynamic that's happening right now. And I think they're even trying to circumvent the old industry with some of their new stuff out there. I know you guys have worked with them a little bit in the past. I do want to make the distinction between what you all are doing and what other royalty-free services are doing. Because if I just randomly had music and I could just put it up on a bunch of places and it would be played for royalty-free, I could get paid. But that, in your case, you're actually buying the music.
Correct.
So a lot of them are almost like
Marketplaces
Marketplaces.
type? Yeah.
There you go. But yours isn't.
No, we are a wholly owned. We own about 9,000 songs, and we own the sound recording and the composition. But part of us buying it, I mentioned it being like a win-win-win. When we buy it, I believe it's still the case, but our contract when we first wrote it, and I think it's still the case, was a page. Like it was literally, it is so self-explanatory. We tell the artist, because that was the other thing is like, we just didn't want to get into a situation where I think where the labels got in trouble is I was a part of a band at one point where their contract was 113 pages or something. And like most bands are not lawyers. So even if they have a lawyer, they're not going to be able to read that whole thing and know what they're getting into, or they're going to realize too late, like later, what they signed. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted it to be like, I can't control someone else's understanding, but I can also do my best to make it as palatable as possible. So that's what we were trying to do in buying it. So we buy it. It's essentially contracted like a work for hire, right? So we're buying the content, but then in there we are allowing them to collect this is even more complicated, but the composition side is actually split into two parts. There is publishing and songwriting, and we let them collect the songwriting share of performance royalties. Yeah, because they wrote the song.
Yeah. So yeah, and like you said, you're buying it, but then sharing the wealth afterwards.
Yep.
And that is not the norm out there. So how big is Soundstripe?
Yeah, we've got customers in over 150 or 140 countries, and have we've got about 60 employees in about 15 states. And to date, we've worked with hundreds of artists all over the world. So yeah, it's been really awesome.
And in that space, from what I remember, you're at the top of, you're not the top, but you're one of the top.
Yes. Yeah, we are definitely, it is a competitive market, but we're one of the leaders for sure.
Yeah. And that to me is so impressive. And just, thinking about that evolution, and I don't know if we're ready I want to dive into what it's like to be Trevor Hinsley in a company like that a little bit. And I don't even know if people know what a CTO is. What is a CTO? Is that's your title, right?
Yeah.
Well, specifically, what is your version of a CTO?
That's true.
Yes. Yeah. So they do, and that's a big caveat that I give anytime I'm talking about this, is that a CTO can look different pretty much everywhere, but the one common denominator is that you are the vision and the strategy for the use of technology at the company. Like, how is it enabling the business's goals? That's what the CTO is doing. So you're basically at the 30,000 foot view, looking out over a long period of time of like, what are the investments we're making today that are going to enable us to be technology forward, and use that technology in a way that, it could be like, if it's a manufacturing business, it may be to stay up on new types of machinery that give you a competitive advantage in production time, right? Or margins or whatever else. So in my case,
and by the way, what is it's Chief Technology Officer. Just
Yes.
in case people didn't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
But some people actually say chief, there's another T word that means the same thing. Technology or
Chief Transformation Officer.
Really?
I've met a Chief Transformation
Wow.
Officer.
Of course. There's the chief everything
It's the
these
same.
days.
It's the same idea. It's like, how do we transform it? It's an enterprise term.
Chief. I think it's Chief Technical Officer is what I've also heard, but technology is the normal one.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but then there's also, and another way to think about it is that you are the externally facing technical leader, because a lot of companies will also have a VP of engineering that is the internal leader, right? So now the CTO is still over the VP, right? And they're helping typically with like standards, processes, whatever, like they're approving all that stuff and working with the VP on that. But a VP is typically aimed at operational excellence, whereas the CTO is the strategy leader on the business strategy leader.
Yeah. You help him convert your ideas into reality.
Yeah. Bingo.
Gotcha.
So that's what I do. And my role right now, I'm actually operating as both. So I'm doing a good bit of operational, but I've got two engineering managers who are awesome and do a lot of the execution. And then I do a lot of business development on the technology side. So relationship building with other companies, which could be, maybe there's technology we want to buy versus build in terms of like, hey, we could make something like this, but we could also cut a deal with them to use it and it would be cheaper or quicker or whatever. Do a lot of that. Finding partnerships that may be mutually beneficial from a strategic standpoint on the tech side. Like I'm brought in to like help, actually vet those and make sure that it's legitimate or that the software is maintainable or the infrastructure is good or whatever. Like, and then in addition, I do on the strategy side, try to constantly keep a pulse on like new companies that are popping up and new technologies that are moving along. And like we were talking about Chat GPT earlier, like what are the ways, for instance, a couple things that have been on my mind over the last couple years really is where is AI going as it relates to music? What does Web3 mean for royalty structures? And have part of my job is also having an opinion about that and maybe presenting to the board on where we can use these things or that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
So what is your opinion on AI and music?
It is ever evolving, but I will say that for a long time, I do not ever think that human created content will go away, period.
Okay.
I think that is innate and it is if nothing else, it's a connective tissue. Like we want to feel connected to the stuff we're making, right?
Sure.
And you absolutely can with AI generated content to a degree. There's only so far. Like I can't meet an AI artist and have an emotional connection with them the same way, right? Now, if we literally have robots everywhere, that might change a bit or somehow, but as far as what we know of we've got bigger problems if we get AGI, artificial general intelligence. But if, as far as AI and its uses today, I think that AI is going to be really powerful from assisted composition, right? Like how fast can you make a song if you've got an AI, like maybe throwing ideas your way for things or like a lot of people are using samples now, right? So like, what if you feel like maybe you're not putting out your best content today? Like you're trying to write a song and it's not working so well. Maybe it can spit out some ideas in the form of MIDI and you just layer samples over it and you're like, wow, this is a great bedrock. And then it inspires you and you move on, right? Those kind of things I think could be really useful tools. There's also, in the vein of like, we've seen this like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, like all these AI generated art, which is fascinating to me because one, it's incredible, but two, there are uses there, just like that's happening with Chat GPT. There are uses there that probably were never even planned for, right? Like I like stuff like Midjourney because we may have an idea like, wow, like if we could get some like, I don't know, abstract art with some blues and yellows, it'd look really cool in here. I can just go put that into Midjourney. It'll spit it out and I can take a high resolution file and get it printed for $20. And I have this beautiful piece of artwork that's unique to me and whatever.
But music, you want a connection.
Okay. That's the big piece.
Yeah.
And it is much, in my opinion, well, I don't even know if it's opinion. It's borderline fact at this point. It has its own set of issues. I won't say it's harder, but it is very difficult to do in a different way than AI generated art, like image art, because for the emotion piece, yes, but you also have if you think of art, right, you're dealing with colors on a page and you can take, like an AI, let's say like you're trying to create a data set for AI, right? You could do that with this is a very elementary approach to this, but I'm just going to give an example. You could take an image and tag every pixel as what color it is, right? And then you can feed it to an AI and it could learn what colors are that way, right? And then you could take maybe one step more abstracted. You could say like, oh, well, this section, this is what an eyeball looks like. You can tag that kind of stuff. Music, you can do the same thing, but what is so difficult about it is that like, we're talking about the interplay of frequencies and how there is like even drum kits, you can have almost infinite variety between what a drum kit could sound like and how you could take an instrument that doesn't sound good on its own, but might sound great with something else in there due to how it affects the mix. And then you've got, you're dealing with like spatial issues between like stereo content or surround or whatever. It's just a fundamentally different set of problems because the other thing is, there is and I realize like, even compared to abstract art, where some people will connect with it and some won't. Music has that too, but there is a subset of music that is pleasant to the ears. And even if you're into noise, chaos stuff, like whatever you're into, there's still a subset that's pleasant. So what can happen is, and I've seen this with AI generated music to date pretty much, is that it either doesn't abide by like the whole, by like the content it's creating isn't musically pleasing, or it has things that kind of break the fourth wall, or which AI art does too. I'm sure you've seen pictures of like 7 fingers on a hand, right? Okay. But it is that's totally different with sound. It literally pulls you out of the experience because music is an emotional, temporal thing that I don't even know if we fully understand like exactly how that works with our like mental makeup. So anyway, it is difficult and it has not been done well yet. And it will have utility, I think, AI generated music, looking at that from a long-term thing. But it's not the end all be all, just like AI generated art won't be.
So it's not making the pretty stuff yet on the music side.
In my opinion, no.
No. And we got music, we have art, we have obviously text and writing compositions now we can say are being AI generated. Writings and art are visually something or you're reading it, but music is performed. And so we're trying to make, there's a little bit of a difference. It may, maybe. And so I'm at the same time, I could have AI generated stuff in the background in an elevator and be just fine. Right. But if I'm getting in the car and I want to get pumped up to go to whatever, I'm going to want to get my music, what moves me to do that.
Like, think about your connections to like nostalgic stuff, right? You have memories and emotions and things that are tied to your nostalgia when you first heard that music or whatever. Like, there's so much more to it. And that's what I mean is that
everybody's got the story about the album they can't listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true.
And I can literally, it was They Might Be Giants. And they have those silly songs in some of their stuff. But I know exactly where my kids were singing that in our house. And when we first moved to Tennessee, I can go back to Bang Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction. And if I say that, do I have to pay royalties? I don't know. But that's what I think about when I think about, that was my wrestling song, I wrestled in high school. Awesome. So, I can always, every time I hear that song, I can almost remember my warm-up routine, I can't do my warm-up routine anymore. I'll pull out my back, but all of that, I think that's why when you get older, you still listen to the music that you had when you were younger, because it brings you back to that time.
Yeah.
I did set a lot of that stuff down though. I was just having a conversation with a buddy of mine. There's some 90s music, because that's when I started. My mind exploded the very first time I heard Bush.
Oh, yeah.
So Machine Head was on the radio when I was traveling through Memphis. And up until that point, I grew up in rural Mississippi, so the music selection was not that good. But once I learned that existed, I found so much. But oh crap!
You said you put stuff down too.
Oh yeah, I'll go back and listen to stuff, and it's just not. It
doesn't hit you the same.
Mm-mm.
No, well, I was an '80s guy, and there was a lot of really bad techno music back then.
Right.
And
the time we thought it was great.
Oh my gosh, right? It was so state of the art. Flock of Seagulls was the greatest thing ever to happen in music. And but I still love that music.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely still love that music, and I think there is something to that deep connection. There's a place for both, right? There will be the absolutely. AI. We do not need for elevator music. You don't need a full orchestra for that. Right. But the live performance, we're always going to want. Like I'm spending all of my free time. When I Google, I'm looking at what concerts do I want to go to this summer. And I get mad that the tour dates are not out yet.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out, can I go to that one? Which, by the way, I'm going to ask you to see if you want to go with me to see Judah and the Lion, which is
cool.
I love Judah and the Lion, and Charlie has a connection to them, and it can go to Knoxville to see them. They never play Nashville because they're from here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We were the same way.
And I'm like, gosh, I got to travel to go see the one band that I really want to see, and maybe if I talk about them enough, they'll come and do a couple of songs here or something. That'd be real.
Well, Judah lives in East Nashville. I see him at the Y every now and again.
Nice.
See, now you're just getting me all
Rubbing it in.
Yeah. But I think that idea of music and yes, data has transformed it. AI is going to continue to transform it, but the heart and soul of music is something it's going to be really interesting, I think, to continue to see over the next however much time, my time, I guess, in thinking about that. So in your world, in what you see, what are some of the changing technologies? You mentioned that as a CTO. By the way, finalist for CTO of the Year here in Nashville with the Nashville Technology Council. Yeah. Congratulations!
Thanks, thank you.
In second year, you want to the way you market yourself is you got to lose twice and then win the third year, and then you get your bang for your buck. And so I'm telling you that. So in case you don't win this year, third year
is always next year.
Is when we have to do the full campaign. And if you do not win this year, that means I'm going to be the one that writes your final thing, because he's probably too humble in when he's nominated for things. That's and but as that CTO, you are constantly looking at what's next. What is next?
Yeah. So we pride ourselves on being we're a music company and always have been from the get-go. But we are equal parts technology. I mean, that was what I brought to, our sort of triangle as founders. And as we look forward, we have gotten really good at leveraging data to solve a bunch of different problems, whether they be a user experience, because that's something we focused on for a long time, is getting people to the right song as fast as possible. We are not like a Facebook where we want to take all your time. Like, we succeed if you get back to what you're doing as quickly as possible. So as we've gotten really good at collecting and using data that is beneficial, but just like you were saying before when we were talking about something, it's not like invasive data, right? It's like we want to know, like, how our music's being used. What are you looking for that we don't have? What are you, it informs the music we buy, like I was talking about, and the music that we may go out and intentionally seek out, like commission. It also informs the way we build our product, the features we add, et cetera. And as we move forward, we are really eyeing to solve some problems for brands. Like, our enterprise customers, enterprise is our fastest growing business line. And
what do you mean by that? What's enterprise customers?
Yeah, so enterprise would be companies that have large teams, typically over 100 employees, and they have maybe multiple departments that are using music. They may be also contracting out different things, everything from like internal training videos all the way to Super Bowl commercials, right? They have tons of different needs and uses for music. And we plan to take our expertise in technology and our relationships and our foundation in music and leverage that and try to solve, the needs of brands and continue to go up market. So a lot of our focus this year is continue to bolster our enterprise products, like the things that we're offering there and the experience that we're providing. But in addition, and part of my job, like looking out over the horizon a bit to say, like, okay, what are the, whether it's AI or Web3 or whatever, what are the things we can use from a technology standpoint to benefit that business line? And I do think that I know that data is going to be a big part of that. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of data running through our business, from everything, like I said, from the front, which is where, when people arrive, we can clearly, like, how many songs are getting used from this playlist, right? Mm-hmm. We can tell that kind of stuff. But also we know where our music's going, thanks to tons of things like YouTube's Content ID or businesses like PEX and things like that. We know where our music's being used. So how can we leverage that to solve problems for brands? So that's kind of the things we're looking into.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned, which, you think they're obviously a tech company, you think music, but the search feature is really important for you.
Yeah.
And I noticed that because I was on the site this morning getting ready for today, and was searching a bunch of different things. And it wasn't just getting songs that had that word in it.
Sure.
It was getting it based on the genre or what it thought I was really wanting. Yeah. And I put in a a boxing sound because we got a Data Rumble as one of our episodes. And so I'm like, I want to hear it, see what I can get for that. And it was a great compilation. I was really surprised because some of the things were like, okay, yeah, it was the with the SFX sounds.
Sure.
Some were like literally a punching bag and things like that.
Yeah.
But then it was a lot of other things that I may not have thought about. And I was like, well, that actually is really good. And so that's kind of the other stuff that I think you're also talking to when you talk about the experience.
Yes, 100%. Our search is incredibly fast. Like if you have used it, that was one thing we focused on. But in addition, it's also, we have this whole system that, and I don't want to give away too much secret sauce here, but we do have this whole system where we are.
Don't give away too much. We don't want to get banned again.
So basically, the way that works is that, we, example I gave a minute ago, if someone searches for something and we don't have anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say, I don't know, you're looking for some quirky track that sounds like a Frank Sinatra song, but a comedy version or something, you may be looking for something super specific that we don't have. We are able to use that data to not only, we can pipe that out later and determine, hundreds of people search for this month. We should buy some, and we have this whole system for that. But we can also use that data to determine, wow, this person had to really jump through hoops to even think about how they would search for this, right? So we can
helping you out with that too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we can also, like, if you go to our website, one thing you'll see is like there are no repeated terms, and what I mean by that is you won't find, if you go to like other royalty-free sites, you'll see terms like dreamy, ambient, ethereal. Like, define the difference between those three to me, and you will get different results from every person you ask, right? So, however, what we did is we've built out this glossary where, like, if you think of terms that could have sort of like a neighbor term or whatever, you won't, like, there's only one way to get there. So what we do instead, though, is that even if you can't get to that from like our filters, like the terms you can filter, you may, give an example I was just giving a minute ago, you may put a bunch of stuff into the search bar, but that informs how we build, and this is where I don't want to give away too much, but how we build the brain under that search bar to be able to know, like, oh, they didn't even know what term to look for over here. So how can we be smart enough to basically take the data we do have, these terms that we've defined, and tie them into what they think they're looking for?
Yeah, that's cool. So to set some understanding, or however you say that, like, it's difficult to have good search in technology as a standard. And that's like every company that has a search bar works really hard on making that search bar work as well as they can.
Yeah.
And so that's cool that you put so much effort into that.
Yeah, that was honestly a big focus for us. We actually have a metric time to value that we use, and it's when you land on our site, how long does it take you to license something for the first time?
Oh, wow.
And it's that.
That's a good metric.
Great data.
Yeah, we have improved that drastically over the last 5 years. So
nice.
Well, we're getting close to time, and I think we could easily spend another few hours on just the music topic and
we didn't even
else.
start to talk about straddling the fence between business and ops.
Well, and I'd say I was gonna just say, Charlie, I think we've got about 10 minutes left, and I always like to throw it to you at this point because you usually have a couple of really good things, and I know we've got a long list here. Any of those want to pop out as a good question for you? I love to put him on the spot.
Love that.
Well, so actually, I'll ask you. We got 4 things. So we've got potential remote work conversation, which we hit on before. We could talk about selling to the enterprise, which would bore 99% of the people listening.
Oh, we sort of just did that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. NFTs and digital music.
Yeah, NFTs and ownership, and how that could potentially be impactful in the future as well. And then personally, is it hard being on the business side and the operational side at the same time?
That's just a fat yes. It is very difficult.
I'm asking from experience.
Oh man, it is. And
let's go with that. Go with it.
Yeah, that one's really tough because they are two different, and I kind of think of it as like, it's almost like business strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So business strategy versus operations, because the operations side absolutely has strategy to it, but it's very different. Now it may have overlap and all these things, but the operational strategy side that operations in general is really tough. And the tough thing about straddling the line there to me is that typically most people excel at one of these things. That you typically don't have someone who is like a boss operational leader and amazing at getting out of the weeds and high level and very like strategy, that kind of stuff. So, where that's tough, even if you can, you know, like, I'm a big proponent of push into your strengths rather than trying to like, it's always good to get better at your weaknesses, but the people that try to level those out, to me, that's wasted time. Like you should just aim so hard to make the things you're already uniquely strong at even more. Right. And I'm a big proponent of hire against your weaknesses because those people are doing the same in reverse, you know? And where it's tough is even if you like, I feel like I am, so I know that I'm a strong software engineer. Always have been. I love it. I'm a very detail-oriented person and passionate.
Like an individual contributor.
Right.
He writes the code.
Writes the codes. I like doing that, right? But I do feel like one of my strong suits, and actually where I sit, like even if I wasn't at Soundstripe today, I know that my unique offering as a CEO or CTO, sorry, is that many CTOs get are very engineering focused. So like hyper technical, that kind of stuff. I really do straddle the line. Like I'm still heavily involved when we go raise money. I'm heavily involved in negotiations, in like assisting with our, and from high level, I can't get in there and do this myself, but like financial projections and things like that. And I enjoy that. I'm an entrepreneur, so I like that. And that the value I provide is that I do believe that one of my strengths is translating between technology and business because I can go into conversations with people that have no technical expertise and explain, like recently, I was explaining a CDN to someone and a CDN is a content delivery network. And that's how do you, like, what does that mean to someone? Well, the way I would explain something like that is like, when you click download on a file on our site, how is that getting to you? Right. If we have one server, let's say in New York or something, and you're in India, that's got to go through some pipes to get to you. It's going to take a long time because the internet is still a bunch of wires and satellites. But
it's a series of connected tubes.
It's a series of connected tubes. Yeah. But what if I could replicate that and have a server in New York, but also have one near you in India? If I could also, when you click download, if I could get really smart and know which of those servers to send to you from, and then keep my files in all of these servers, that's a CDN, right? So this is, that's like, again, one probably, again, elementary example, but that's the kind of thing where, you know, when we're assessing new technologies, especially ones that, you know, if you going into meetings and talking about stuff like NFTs, heard that was another topic. It's much easier to talk about that now, but when that was a burgeoning technology or like really starting to get on people's radars 6-7 years ago, much more difficult to sit down and explain what a blockchain was. And there's value in being able to communicate that stuff, especially, with the position I hold, which is looking out ahead and trying to beat those things, right?
Yeah, you're a technology leader, so you got to know what's up.
Got to know what's up. Yep. And you have to be able to explain that it is not just like whatever it is that you're enthusiastic about or see value in is not just a toy or has value to the business goals. Yeah.
So the way I describe that is like when you become a leader, if you imagine yourself walking down like a tree that's knocked over and there's a bunch of branches going up. So when you're an operational person, you're looking down at where your feet are. Like you're just walking on what you see. And then the second you become leader, you have to look up and you have to, to know what each branch does and where it goes. And you've got to know as many possibilities as possible so you can pick the right one.
Right.
And so I find that if I switch from that back to ops, then I get tripped up and I can't focus. Because they're two uniquely different time sets.
Yes, it is difficult to, someone put it this way before, and it is, especially in the early days, like as a founder, when you're wearing a million hats, you have to get really good at context switching and basically going in and coming out. And it is, I don't know if anyone ever, there's a couple people, actually entrepreneurs I look up to that I think are uniquely great at that, but it is really tough. It's really tough.
I noticed myself, because I've been a one-man show forever, I feel like, in what I was doing. And now I have 5 wonderful team members. and I'm being asked to be the strategy guy and the face, and I want to code,
Right.
and I want to do all the stuff, and they keep saying you're in my way, and so I'm struggling with it. And
it's painful.
It's very tough.
It is, and I think what you just explained really hits home for me. Where what you're good at is you were an ops person, obviously you built it, right?
Right.
And you had to become the strategic person, but because you had that ops part to you, you can explain it now to anybody in layman terms.
Yes.
And that's why you'll be the good business person because of that ability. And people always say to me, one thing that I do, especially from a statistics standpoint, is I explain it in terms that anybody can understand because I think I had to live it first.
Sure.
And so I think that's a great leader. A great leader is somebody that can be visionary and also explain where you're going and what's going on.
And get in the weeds with the nerds too.
Okay, that's
still
it is,
fun.
and it's still infinitely valuable. I think for any, we'll say department, right? It's still really valuable to have times where you're at the ground floor because if you lose sight, it's like take like a recent example was like when Tesla's production like died a year or two ago, and like Elon went in at the factory level. Like you have to do things like that sometimes because not only is it beneficial to have someone with the high level context, but like that person has unique context that no one in the factory does. So you can bring that to them. And then the other thing is like what better way to tie your team to your mission than to say like, I know this because of X, Y, Z, and here's the conversations we're having, and here's where the business is going, et cetera. By you doing this, you are directly impacting. They can see where their work is affecting, especially in larger companies, these bigger initiatives.
So that is the number one thing that improves employee's time at your company is that they know that the work that they do goes towards a greater goal.
100%.
And the like the building of the picture in general is like you're not just telling them that this is what you need to do, but like you mentioned, they're giving you the information to make the best decisions because there could be something new that you didn't know about.
Sure.
You know, like frameworks change and stuff like that happens. And so you could start to hear those in, far enough down the road to where when the decision time is coming on you, you've got a better set of knowledge than you would otherwise. Because I feel like that's where a lot of like, we'll call them business-oriented CTOs. That's where they trip up because they're not looking as far down the road. They can't see as far down the road because they don't know what makes up the whole ecosystem, so to speak. Because they're tied up in dealing with legacy systems and like, how do I get this data from this legacy system connected with this other thing? And they're worried more about that, and they're worried more about like, well, what is ServiceNow going to be doing, and how much are they going to charge me for setting up the? How do I get all this stuff set up? They're not really out ahead,
right?
Because they're tied to this thing, and so I feel like the points that you're making are extremely valuable. If anybody's listening that is in technology and is the individual contributor, is that it's difficult to make the transition, but it's also imperative that you keep up with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and how many CTOs can say within their specific industry of, let's say, just music, that they toured with a real band and where it sold out arenas, and then literally we're writing the code, and so you're very uniquely qualified for what you do, and obviously Soundstripe is what it is today because of the amazing work that you have done. But you're also you have a personal life too.
I do.
And so how do you kind of manage the few? And I know that you've had definitely some great additions and things like that to the family in the last year. So how is it trying to be a CTO and be in the weeds and have hobbies and have a life with the family too?
It is. It would be tougher if I was in business with different people. And my partners are absolutely amazing. We've been doing Soundstripe for over 7 years now, and there is so much mutual respect and autonomy and freedom and patience. And like we have been in the trenches together. We've been on the mountain together, like all of these things. And one of the things that we value between us three is work-life balance. That's important to our employees, but it's also very important to us. So like Micah, one of my business partners, he has a son who's a few months older than my daughter, but we had kids around the same time. And, I'm able to be with my girlfriend and my child without having to deal with like, and to be fair, she's amazing and very understanding when stuff doesn't go this way. Cause ultimately we still are the business owners. So we have to deal when stuff happens. But when I leave at 5, I'm able to cut off. I'm not getting pinged all night, every night, or like, even though I own the technology, I don't have my business partners micromanaging what's going on in engineering or having and then texting me at 10 p.m. Because I've heard of these horror stories of this stuff happening elsewhere.
It's more common than not.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it is, and look, I mean, especially over, over the last year, it's like when you're a founder, but in particular, I think this probably goes with any executive position, but definitely when you're a founder and it is your baby, it is rare that I truly have a 9-to-5 day. Right. Yeah. But, it is, what I will say is that the freedom to make space for myself and my family is there. And that's so, awesome. If I know that, I'm going to need to stay a few hours late tonight or whatever, I don't have to feel like, I don't have to feel like I'm burdening anyone else if the next day I'm like, hey, I'm going to cut out at 5 today because of yesterday. Mm-hmm. I need to, it makes that kind of stuff way easier. And I've even been in different environments, just in even jobs growing up where that was not the norm, not the norm. So yeah, very thankful.
Well, obviously, you talked about it earlier with your band. You were able to cut it off and do other things. You in Soundstripe probably had a lot to do with there being the work-life balance.
Yes, because I did not have that before.
It is intentional.
Yes, yeah. when we were building Soundstripe, I don't think any of us had work-life balance. I mean, I remember in June 2017, I'll never forget this. I had rebuilt the platform. I was still the only developer. And I had rebuilt the platform to be an API with a separate front end, which is a fancy way of saying your browser's doing more work than it was beforehand. Mm-hmm. When I had gone to launch this, we had set a self-imposed deadline to get it out by June 23rd, 2017. Still can never forget this. And we were going to do it. I was determined to hit this date and I had built this whole thing myself. So we got there and I probably still had 3 weeks of work left by the week before. Hmm. And I was like, nope, I'm doing it. So Micah, my business partner, who couldn't help me at all, right? Because he's like, I was the only developer and I was just dealing with coding problems. So what's he going to do? Cheer me on. And
bring you coffee.
And that is exactly what he did. He said, I went in at Monday morning at 8 or 9 a.m. I worked till 2 or 3 a.m. I did that every night that week until Thursday. I slept a couple extra hours, got in at 11 a.m. I worked from Thursday morning at 11 a.m. until Friday night at 6 p.m. So I was there for 30 hours and I didn't leave my seat the whole time. And Micah he just sat there with me, brought me food, drink, just would if I'm okay, I need 30 seconds to clear my head on this, he'd be like, all right, well, tell me about we talk about some show we've been watching or something, but that, it was awesome because of, it just shows the kind of people that I work with. They're great. For sure. But when we got through that weekend, when I added it up at the end, it was 120 hour week or something. And, I was like, this is unsustainable. I actually felt sick and had,
I bet.
Yeah, my immune system was down.
Sure.
And I was like, I can't do this again. So I made some changes at that point where I really started focusing on on a normal day, I'm going to try to get home by 6. And if stuff needs to get done, that's fine, but I'm going to have recovery after.
Mm. Yeah. But no more procrastination.
No more. Which is funny because the problem actually wasn't procrastination. It was that I was a little too optimistic about the deadline. Yeah.
Well, for me, it's been procrastination in the past.
Touche.
So
yeah, no, I understand that. Well, we're at an hour and a half, and so and I turn into a pumpkin in an hour and a half. That's basically what happens now. But this was a great conversation. I obviously really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk to you, Trevor. Charlie, any last parting shots?
No, I have learned so much today. It's been really good talking.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for for sure. What we want to offer you up some parting shots. What would you like to end with for it?
I would just say, like, if if this is something that interests you, like the marriage between music and technology, keep an eye on Soundstrap's website. We always have jobs popping up, and all of them involve data. So if you are interested in being a part of this, we love having great people, and we solve tough problems. So.
Okay.
And thank you so much for having me on this, both
Thank you.
Charlies. Thank you.
We definitely. I knew this was going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for being willing to come on and start this data in project for us. And Charlie, any last little bits?
Until next time.
Until next time, I'm Charlie Pegian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding.
And until next time, there you go. Talk to you all later and in the books.
Awesome.
Yeah, I literally just got the text message. My son's engaged.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Look at that.
And how old is he?
24.
That is amazing.
24. Yeah.
Did you know it was coming?
Oh, yeah. Where are they?
So it's good conversation.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my ears hurt and my left leg is numb. What the heck?
It's probably the
So I was like sitting here going like this, and I'm like, I look probably so stupid on that video. Oh my God, what happened to my leg? It's like dead.
Hey, thanks for the water too.
Yeah, no problem.
That was so much fun.
That was fun.
We, something else I was thinking about is like we're 3 different steps in fatherhood. Because your kids knew.
Oh, you want to do the data? We're doing data in parenting.
Oh my gosh.
Don't you think that'd be a good one? I mean,
Actually,
think about
that's super
what is the
interesting.
strategies, and
You're
Charlie is doing such a better job of the data and parenting part than this is a Wild West for me.
I've been thinking about it for years though.
Have you?
Yeah, my kid's 10, or
Okay.
my oldest is 11, my youngest is 7. And it's like how I'm about to start teaching them the digital ways.
Okay.
And it's like password. I've already got them charging, so they charge on their own.
Oh, okay.
Because that was it's a discipline you have to learn.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so don't burn
And,
them out.
Yep.
and now it's getting into writing stuff down, and then once you write it down, it's like how to store it. But then like how we're gonna deal with passwords as a family. And all the other
One
stuff.
password. Do you use one password?
That's
we
what I
do,
use.
yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
I've been
I
using
gotta
it.
get my family to use it now.
It's
Even
awesome.
though I have the family account, and I haven't forced them into it yet, but
I've had it since 2013, so 10 years.
I had it when it was still just football. So
Yeah. Yep.
we're probably around
Hey,
same
come on
age,
in.
sure we
That
did.
sounds right.
So how's it going?
good. How you doing?
So I do that, and I do the
How
Google
was
backup,
the,
and I have the keychain too.
Ah, nice.
So I have them all in 3 places.
Love that.
Yeah.
But we're
Good job on you.
like we're definitely conscious about it. And
That's
so
cool.
it's
Trevor, I
it's a
don't know if
new
you know
world.
Colin.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Trevor.
Colin's over at Soundstripe.
Well,
Oh,
Sound good.
yes. And he was our data in music.
He's like,
Uh,
"All right, it's good."
Awesome.
yeah, cool key.
Yeah, it was a good time. Well, y'all, what are you guys talking about?
Well, this will be our data rumble.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So I literally just texted him last night saying, "Why don't you come and hang out with us?"
And
And then,
I probably shouldn't have because I'm like, what am I going to talk about?
I love it.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, just like.
I do have a music lesson at 1:30 though, so I need to leave at 1. Is that all right?
And then in East Nashville.
It's like 15 minutes away from here, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
If that doesn't work, don't worry.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
We will probably go longer than that. Those
We can
things.
get up and leave.
Yeah, no, we could definitely do that. We'll
It's
see
up to
if
you.
we-
I'm fine either way.
I'd like to jump. I'd like to-
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
here
So,
too.
yeah,
Great to meet
yeah,
you.
thank
Nice
you.
to meet you. Good to see you.
Have a
Trevor.
good time with your family.
Thank you so much.